Hello, my name is Bailey, and I have had 2 miscarriages and an ectopic pregnancy.
My name is Jen, and I have had 3 miscarriages.
My name is Misty Nicole, and I've had 6 miscarriages. And this time focusing on my miscarriage story. So if you would like to hear about those experiences, please stay tuned. Please be respectful in watching my video, and if this is something you're not comfortable watching, I completely understand, and just go to a different channel, but please refrain from using defaming comments or any of the such in my video. This is my personal experience in my life, and it's not the place for your isms, and it's not the platform for your personal judgment. So if this is something, again, that you're not comfortable with, now's the time to turn it off. Stillbirth, and for me, 6+ years into my story, it's not easy. And while many women experience miscarriage early in their first trimester, this was not what happened in my case. My first miscarriage, was actually a late third trimester pregnancy miscarriage. And so for me, it was incredibly devastating, to say the least, because if you are a mom or a parent, you can probably get this, that you become attached to your baby the minute that you see pink lines pop up on your pregnancy test. You don't have to physically hold your child in your hand to have them in your heart. It's something that's embedded in you. As soon as you see the lines on that test, your world changes, and for me, there was no exception. Stillbirth, and for me, 6+ years into my story, it's not easy. And while many women experience miscarriage early in their first trimester, this was not what happened in my case. My first miscarriage, was actually a late third trimester pregnancy miscarriage. And so for me, it was incredibly devastating, to say the least, because if you are a mom or a parent, you can probably get this, that you become attached to your baby the minute that you see pink lines pop up on your pregnancy test. You don't have to physically hold your child in your hand to have them in your heart. It's something that's embedded in you. As soon as you see the lines on that test, your world changes, and for me, there was no exception. Daughter, and she would have been named Lucy, and she would have turned 6 years old this month. And so for me, when I think of her, I think of her as a person, as someone with her own identity and personality and her own traits. And I try to think of her as she would have been in my mind's eye. I picture her as a little girl. I've tried to picture her as a teenager, as an adult, and I like to think that she would have looked like my grandmother. I think she would have had curly or wavy hair, and she would have had very light porcelain skin and a great sense of humor and very poor eyesight. The child would have had glasses, because both of her parents do. And so I think of Lucy in those terms. And then comes in the reality of the miscarriage and the loss of that miscarriage. At first, it was almost a denial, and then an anger, and a mourning, and almost a bargaining, with your creator, with God, and wondering, is there something I can do differently in my life so this wouldn't happen again? And then there's an extreme sadness and depression and lethargy. And then people tell you that there'll be an acceptance to this. But to this day, I still don't feel that acceptance. I understand why miscarriage happens, but I don't think I'll ever come to terms with the acceptance of her passing, in so much as, while she had never been born, she was still mine. And I regard her in the same way I would any family member that dies. I think it should be a time of coming together, of being a tighter knit family, a closer clan, if you will. And to this day, I have a hole in my heart for that child. And even being a parent and still being in an age bracket, if you will, that I could have other children, it doesn't take the place of that one. And so there'll always be that sadness for me in terms of her. There was initially, the D&C that comes with my miscarriage, and there was the gory things like bleeding for the next several weeks and months of not having my hormones in balance, and all the spotting and the craziness that came with that, and the subsequent trips to see physicians and trying to research and figure out what I could have possibly done wrong for this to happen. And then there's the tangible business of having to decide what things you'll keep and what things you'll let go of, including clothes and baby gear and hanging swings and playpens and pack and plays, and the list goes on and on of things that are physically standing in your home and a constant reminder of what you've lost. That was something that I had to deal with as well. And then, of course, there were the comments and the things that people said, even by people that meant to say and do nice things. You would hear, you could always have another. You can try again, as if your child is some kind of missed lottery opportunity, or, a flight that you didn't make at the airport. I mean, it's not a do-over. It was a person. It was a human being. And I suppose until that's your child, even for women who have multiple children, it doesn't change that fact. Nothing is negated. And for a long time, I resented the people that said that, even if they meant it. And honestly, a few people that said that to me, I just kind of grew apart from them. And some of those people I still don't speak to this day. And that's something that you never hear about. And even amongst communities of women, you never hear that aftermath, especially around that date, is just something that's systematic and it never goes away. And if you know anyone who has had a loss of a child or a miscarriage or a stillbirth, they need support. They need emotional support. And they need self-care and that time of reflection. So if you have any of those women in your life, even if it feels uncomfortable to reach out, tell them that you're thinking about them and tell them something, because it's often the silence that lets us have that room for all that negativity and self-doubt. And if you've ever not had a miscarriage, then you might not know that any woman who has feels a tremendous sense of guilt and self-responsibility. And in those days, she just needs to be able to acknowledge a few things, such as, this was my child. This was perhaps their gender or their name. These are the mementos that I kept. This is what I remember of my baby. And subsequent miscarriages, I was not prepared for the sheer amount of exhaustion that I felt. I was tired and hormonally drained, if that makes sense, for a long, long time, for months on end. And then there was, of course, the fevers and the chills and just the cramps, and not just regular period cramps. These were uterine cramps from Hades themselves. They hurt, they were sporadic, and they lasted a long, long time. This was just not something I was prepared for. When I initially had my miscarriage, they were pregnancy level pains. The cramps that I felt afterwards were equally traumatic, and no one ever talks about that. So I didn't know that it was coming, and each time a new bout of these occurrences would happen, it was like losing something again and again and again. And even though I had a support system at home, my husband, a few family members, there's nothing that they can really do. There's no one There's nothing that a healthcare provider could have done. It was just something I had to go through the motions of, and it left me completely empty. And if you've ever been in a space of exhaustion and mental emptiness, you know just how horrific that is. You have nothing left to give, and that's just not a place that I would ever hope to see myself in again. Emotionally draining, but spiritually draining, including just physical changes, such as hormonal changes that caused me to have cystic acne for the first time since being a teenager, and it was traumatic enough the first time. I looked worse than the dreaded pregnancy mask. It was painful, and it was in obvious hormone-inducing places such as my jawline and on the sides of my temples and on the bridge of my nose. And I'm talking about the kind of acne that the baddest of estheticians couldn't have touched. It was painful, it was humiliating, and it hurt just tremendously, tremendously hurt. Another symptom that was uber embarrassing was that I was producing milk, and I didn't have a baby to feed that milk to. And so that was something that I had to have medical intervention to stop. I also had the unfortunateness of having pregnancy weight that was on my person that normally postpartum you would self-identify and work past, because you have a baby as a result of this weight, and such a blessing came through such a hindrance. But when you have to work through the weight and there's no baby to show for this, it's one of the most defaming and shaming experiences that a woman can go through. It hurts immensely in terms of your self-esteem and your self-identity and your self-awareness, and it's a horribly, horribly low point that I would never want to have to go through again. So even after losing a child, I still had morning sickness and pregnancy fatigue and the changes in libido and cravings for food, and it took quite a while for those to go away. And so when you feel like you're pregnant and you know that you're not, it's a constant daily reminder that something went terribly wrong. It's a devastating event of my personal life. I also have had 5 other miscarriages that were first trimester miscarriages, and so they were not miscarriage that was a second trimester. And I've also had several other miscarriages that were first trimester miscarriages. As horrible as it sounds, it was that first miscarriage that just devastated me beyond belief. And to this day, I hope that my husband and I will perhaps have more children. We've also discussed adoption, and that's something that definitely is on our hearts, as we were both adopted ourselves. But I hope that in time I will eventually be at a place where my miscarriages don't guide my opinions on my actions towards children moving forward. I also recognize that every woman is different and every miscarriage story is different. And so I have said all this to say this. It's okay, and you're not alone. And some days will be better than other days. And you're perfectly fine in your opinions and how you feel. And yes, you should discuss your children, because that's what they were. They were whatever it is that you feel that they were, and you deserve to be validated and loved, and you deserve that happiness. And whatever your personal belief system is, I believe it to be true for you. And so I want you to know that you're not alone, and there are other people who can understand what you're going through, or in the very least empathize with your position. And I hope that you would consider me one. And so for everyone watching this, thank you again so much for watching. Again, please be sure to check the description bar below for the other wonderful ladies in this collab, as well as Roxanne from The Guy's Life, who had another awesome video montage that she recently put together of miscarriage stories, including her own, which is something that you should check out. She also has several other videos on her site, on her channel rather, dealing with her own story that might be an insight towards something that you're going through, or perhaps you're a spouse or a loved one. It might give you some perspective into people in your own life. And if you have never gone through a miscarriage or a stillbirth or pregnancy and you're a woman, it would still behoove you to take a look. And if you're a man and you have women in your life, you should take a look as well. And so with that, I would like to leave you with this. Please be kind to yourself and to others and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for watching.